Welcome to the first Fantasy Football Goon podcast of 2017. I'm your host, Joe Mandel, the Goon. And as always with me is my friend and colleague, John Santucci, Tooch. What's going on, Tooch?
Hey, Joe. It's always good to be back talking fantasy football with you.
Yeah.
Long off season.
Yeah, long time ready, and we're ready for some football. Today's podcast, we're going to run through each. We're going to do a separate podcast for each division and kind of highlight each team and guys you should target and guys you should stay away from. So for today's podcast, we're going to be talking about the AFC East. And who are we going to start with, John? I think we'll start with the Buffalo Bills.
Sounds good.
So the Buffalo Bills have a new head coach in Sean McDermott, and their offensive coordinator is Rick Dennison.
Neither of them I've heard of.
Well, they're a team in change. Obviously, there's only a few guys on the Buffalo Bills that you're going to target in fantasy, right, John?
Right. Yeah. And the guy you're looking at is LaShawn McCoy, who was a statistical leader, in a lot of categories, or one of top 10 in a lot of categories.
Yeah, he's a top 5 running back for me, and a guy that really carried me last year in all my leagues.
Yep, over 1,200 yards rushing. He had a lot of receiving yards, I think almost 400, 300 something. 11th in the league in touches. Had a total of 14 touchdowns, and that's key. It was good for fourth in the for running back group. Yeah,
and the one thing you got to watch with LaShawn McCoy though is every year he'll flirt with some injuries for a few games, but I still don't think that's enough to detract you from taking him as a first-round running back, or if you're lucky to get him towards the second round, or if he leaks into the third round, then that's a steal.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to get out of the first round this year.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, he is 30 years old though, I think, which is when running backs start to decline. But I would say you're safe this year. 50 catches to add to those rushing yards, and that's really what you're looking for, especially if you're playing PPR.
Yeah, absolutely. In a PPR league, LaShawn McCoy's value is even higher than he would be in a standard league. You got to expect him to have at least, probably 5 or 6 catches a game. So you're automatically talking at least probably a 10-point game every game. So obviously Shady McCoy is a target. So he's got 2 backups. The Buffalo Bills have Jonathan Williams and Mike Tolbert. Neither guy I wouldn't consider drafting either of them. Only if McCoy gets hurt, they would be
Correct.
Worth a stash. Or if you're in a really deep 12-man league, that could be a late-round pick for you. Maybe a Mike Tolbert who's going to get a lot of goal line carries.
Yeah, Jonathan Williams would probably be the lead back if Shady were to go down.
Oh, yeah. It's just, Tolbert's always been that short little guy on the goal line. It'd be kind of a crapshoot between the two of them, I think, personally, points-wise, if they were to split it up.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, that, Shady's your lead back, he's your third down back, and he gets a lot of goal line carries, too. So, that's the kind of situation you're looking for.
Oh, yeah, he's one of those guys that kind of dominates every aspect of the game, and that's what you're looking for when it comes to a fantasy stud. Obviously, at quarterback, you've got Tyrod Taylor, who was surprised last year with his performance. He's one of those guys that, if you have a late flyer and you're looking for a backup with a lot of potential upside, I think he's one of those guys you can target, towards the very end of your draft.
Completely agree. Yeah, he's a great late round target for your backup quarterback in case your starter goes down. 580 rushing yards, which was top for quarterbacks. 6 touchdowns on the ground as well, and he doesn't really do it in the air, although he does throw a very nice deep ball. And with Sammy Watkins back and looking healthy, he still has the foot. Tyrod had 3,000 yards, which was 25th in the league, but I think. For most of the year, I would say more than 50% of the games he finished, with quarterback 1 points, per game. So Tyrod Taylor also, if you're looking to play matchup, if your first quarterback isn't as strong as you think, might want to take a flyer. They do play the Jets twice a year. So
yeah, yes, they do. You can't go wrong with that.
Right. What do you think about Sammy Watkins this year?
He's always an injury risk for me. A lot of guys are saying this is finally going to be his year to stay healthy and get everything together, and I just don't see it happening personally. But not to say it's impossible. I don't think he's worth. For me, I wouldn't take a shot on Sammy Watkins inside of the first 5 rounds. If you can get him late, it's worth a flyer. But for me, where you have to get him, I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, somehow I think he's going to go earlier than that just on promise alone.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, the risk is high, the reward is high. Is this the year? We've waited so long for him. Is this the year? Not sure. They did, on the opposite of Sammy Watkins, they did draft a promising young rookie in Zay Jones, who may be a good 4th or 5th wide receiver, to stash on your bench in case, Sammy goes down and Zay Jones is, getting most of the wide receiver targets.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're looking at their wide receiver depth chart currently, I mean, you've got Sammy Watkins, Andre Holmes, Corey Brown, Walter Powell, and Colby Listenby. I think it says it all there, right?
Zay Jones, I heard, has looked good in training camp. Of course, everyone has to earn a spot, but he's definitely someone to look at later on. As the year goes on and you have to shuffle players due to bye weeks, you might get a chance to pick him up before he explodes.
Yeah,
if he does explode. Yeah,
definitely could be a good late round target. Let's move on to tight end. Charles Clay is their starting tight end. He always has an up and down roller coaster year. The guy's always getting hurt. For me, I just can't draft the guy. He's not healthy enough. He's one of those guys you may have to pick up mid-season.
Yeah, on a bye week, a flyer, streaming tight end. But, he had the same amount of touchdowns as Travis Kelce. They both had 4. Which I think is kind of an interesting stat.
It's an interesting stat.
Travis Kelce had a lot more yards.
Yeah, that's to say the least.
Charles Clay finished with 552 receiving yards and 57 catches. So you wouldn't think having him as a second tight end.
Yeah,
just a thought.
It's a guy you can, if you grab him late and hold on to him, it could be one of those picks that if he stays healthy, it might pay off for you.
The numbers aren't terrible. Let's just say that.
No. And then, of course, they have a new kicker they acquired in the offseason, the Buffalo Bills. Steven Hauschka, coming from Seattle, is now the kicker in Buffalo. New team, great kicker. You're always going to take your kicker probably in the last round or two anyway. But Hauschka, I expect him to have a lot of opportunity in Buffalo to get a lot of points as a kicker.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I keep forgetting that Hauschka is on Buffalo now.
Yeah,
I'm also glad that you mentioned taking your kicker at the end of the draft. I don't really see any point in taking a kicker earlier than the 12th, 13th round. That's just my strategy. At the end of the year, I think when my kicker was on a bye, I ended up picking up Matt Ryan just because he was on waivers
right.
And you could pick up a kicker anywhere. It's not as important. You want to grab those wide receivers and running backs. It just pay off more.
Oh, absolutely. And to wrap things up, talking about the Buffalo Bills, their bye week is on week 6.
Okay, how about their defense?
Yeah, let's talk about their defense too. Well, they're in a tough division with playing New England twice a year, but alongside playing New England twice a year, they also play the Jets twice a year and the Dolphins twice a year.
I think we're in agreement that the Jets will be the worst team in the league. Or at least one of the worst teams. I don't think you'll have any argument for me there.
I would be surprised if they won more than 5 games.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I'd place the over and under on that at 3.
Yeah. Sorry to the New York Jets fans, but it's just the truth.
Yeah, it's a rebuilding year
for sure. But Buffalo's defense, not top end for me, but a team that has some decent pass rush. They may still give up a lot of points, but if you need a defensive flyer, your team's on a bye week, you could do worse than Buffalo. Agreed?
I think so, yeah.
All right, well, with that said, you ready to move on to the Miami Dolphins?
I'm ready.
All right, Miami Dolphins. Adam Gase going into his second year with the Dolphins. So, obviously, Adam Gase is more known for his passing game than his run game.
That's correct, yeah.
But, I mean, look at Jay Ajayi last year. Ajayi. I always say it wrong.
Finished fourth in the league in rushing with 1,272 yards. Has some, injury issues and didn't really start as the starting running back to start off the year. Right. Finished 10th in the league in touches with 287. Had like a couple monster games, if I remember. Not much of a threat in the passing game, but did have 8 touchdowns on the ground.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if he catches more balls this year out of the backfield.
Well, how many catches did that man have? He had only 27. Still, if you're looking for a high risk, high reward player, maybe he has more than I think one game he had over 200 yards on the ground.
Yeah, well, he got a lot of his yardage for the season in that one game.
Right.
But he's still a very talented guy. Relatively interesting way to start the year. I mean, we'll have a whole different separate strength of schedule podcast, but
yeah,
like we said, I mean, they start the year against the Buccaneers, Chargers, and the Jets, and then New Orleans. So I expect him to rack up some rush yards in the first 4 games.
Right, and he, I would say 14-team league, he doesn't get out of the first round. 12-team league, he doesn't get out of the first round. 10-team league, maybe a second-round pick. But what do you think? Jay Ajayi, first-round pick?
Yeah, I think he's a very tail end of the first round. But yeah, I think a guy with like him who's going to dominate a lot of carries for that team. I think he's a guy that I expect him to get an uptick in catches in the backfield. And I think he's a guy you can take in the end of the first round, or if you're lucky enough to get him in the second round, I think that's a good value right there.
Yeah, if he is there in the second round, you have got to pull the trigger.
Agreed, 100%. There's not a whole lot of guys that you can say you want to pick up on the Miami Dolphins in the first round. I think the only one is Jay Ajayi. But they had some breakout wide receivers last year.
Yeah.
Handful of
I'm
guys.
a big fan of Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, Jarvis Landry, very solid.
94 catches last year.
Yeah, in a PPR league, Jarvis Landry to me is definitely a top 10 wide receiver with the talent to be a top 5.
Yep, 131 targets too. That was good for 16th in the league. If Jarvis Landry's your third wide receiver, you're looking pretty good.
Oh, definitely.
If your second round, you're okay still, but he doesn't really get into the end zone a lot. I think he only had 3 touchdowns this past season, but Jay Ajayi definitely. Jarvis Landry. My mistake. 4 touchdowns. This year's, you think Jarvis gets in the end zone a little bit more?
I think 100%. I think guys like Jarvis Landry are guys that you have to target in the fantasy draft. A guy with a ton of talent that had a bit of a down year last year. And when I say down year, I'm talking about touchdowns. I mean, he had a great year, all around. But in terms of performing with touchdowns, he's a guy that you can definitely target. And personally, in all my leagues, Jarvis Landry is really high up for me. On my
over 1,100 yards receiving. It was good for 10th in the league. He was 1136. Finished 8 yards ahead of Doug Baldwin. This year, as Jarvis Landry and Ryan Tannehill have a little more familiarity with Adam Gase's offense, the arrow has to be pointing up for Jarvis.
Oh, yeah.
And for 100%. Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, Tannehill, I think he's a guy you really got to watch. I mean, there's injury news that came out today that he had a non-contact injury, but they're saying it looks like there's no structural damage. So from the way it's looking, he's going to start. He'll be ready for the start of the season. But Still, I think he's an undraftable quarterback.
Yeah, maybe 14-team league, a backup. When your starters on the bye, Ryan Tannehill is an okay option.
Yeah,
but, maybe this year he breaks out. Jay Cutler had a decent year in Adam Gase's offense, and Adam Gase's 1 year in Chicago.
Right.
So you never know.
Yeah.
Nothing behind Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys that he can have an amazing game, or he can have the worst game you've ever seen. But besides the guys we talked about, there's really only one other guy that I think you can target. New addition at tight end for the Dolphins. They have Julius Thomas.
Yeah, I really like him. He played for Adam Gase in Denver. Very, very athletic. Kind of like a former basketball player, I think, like Jimmy Graham.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, last year he had 4 touchdowns. Not bad in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
This year happens to be on Miami, so he's moving around. He might, as a second tight end, you can't do much worse.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of upside because he can't do much worse than he did in Jacksonville with Blake Bortles.
And Martellus Bennett had a great year under Adam Gase's offense in Chicago when Adam Gase was in Chicago.
This is true.
So maybe Julius Thomas has a breakout year. Might if you're looking for a backup to your starting tight end, Julius Thomas would be a decent option.
I agree 100%. The Dolphins have their bye week in Week 11. What do you think about the Dolphins' defense, John?
Playing the Jets twice a year, I obviously like. Again, apologies to Jets fans. But
yeah,
I definitely like the Miami defense this year. They're good against the pass. They have a decent pass rush. They have a very good secondary with Rashad Jones back there and decent linebackers. But yeah, I do think Miami will have a decent year at defense. And if you're drafting your defense and your last couple draft picks, Miami would be a really good pick.
Yeah, and they drafted in the draft their first pick this year, Charles Harris, outside linebacker from Missouri. I think they're going to be a much improved defense.
Right, very, very good pass rusher.
Yes.
And they already have a good pass rush with Cameron Wake there.
Yes, Cameron Wake is excellent. So the Dolphins could be a nice sleeper defense this year for sure. So let's move on to the reigning Super Bowl champions.
Yeah.
You got the New England Patriots.
It all starts with Tom Brady.
Yeah, all starts with Brother Tom. Obviously, Bill Belichick's still a coach, 18th season. Josh McDaniels is currently their offensive coordinator. And it all starts with the man under center, Tom Brady. For me, still a top 5 quarterback, even at 40 years old. Today's his 40th birthday.
Is it today?
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday, Tom Brady.
Yeah, happy birthday, Tom.
He missed 4 games to start the season, but finished, with almost 3,600 yards and got 28 touchdowns in 12 games. For an average of 296 passing yards per game. Is 4th in the league in yards per attempt, which is also a good stat, 8.2 yards.
Yeah.
28 touchdowns, not bad.
Not at all.
This year he's got a lot more weapons.
Yes, he does. Let's talk about the biggest upgrade at wide receiver. They made a trade with the Saints. They picked up Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, and I kind of this is X factor for me because I'm having a hard time predicting or projecting Brandon Cooks since there are so many targets there. You have Gronk, you still have Julian Edelman, and Edelman gets a lot of targets, a lot of receiving yards. Edelman had 1,100 yards, was 3rd in the league with targets.
It's that reason alone that to me I have Brandon Cooks as a number 2 wide receiver. I have Edelman as the number 1 in New England still.
Yeah, I do too. Brandon Cooks had on the flip side, he had 117 targets in New Orleans, which also pretty. You also have Chris Hogan and Malcolm Mitchell. There's a lot of mouths to feed on that offense that could break out. Chris Hogan had one or two big games. Malcolm Mitchell started to emerge at the end of the year.
Yep, and you got Danny Amendola.
You have Danny Amendola still, and James White. James White, I don't remember how many receptions he had, but he finished third in the league in receptions with 60.
Yeah, their backfield's a bit of a cluster right now. Currently, they have Rex Burkhead, Mike Gillislee, Deion Lewis, and James White. So there's a lot of mouths to feed there.
And Deion Lewis is still there.
Yes, he is.
James White, if you're in a PPR, is not a bad pickup. For a fourth running back, fill in. 60 catches. The guy I'm looking at, I'm having a hard time projecting as well as Mike Gillislee. He had eight rushing touchdowns with Buffalo last year, and LeGarrette Blount had 18 with New England. So you figure somewhere in the middle there between 18 and 8 for Gillislee.
Yeah. I think he's going to have a lot of success, and I think Rex Burkhead is also going to get his fair share of carries. Yeah,
Gillislee is very talented.
I agree.
He's big. He's fast. He's got some breakaway speed. I got to figure Gillislee will get every single goal line touch, much the way LeGarrette Blount did.
Yeah, he's a big guy, and I think he's going to get a lot of goal line touches. I agree with you 100%.
I think in mock drafts, Gillislee is going pretty early. Second, third, fourth round. So people are a little high on him. If you happen to miss out on one of those, upper tier running backs in the first and second round, Gillislee would be a good pick in the third.
He's a great upside back, a really talented guy that is finally going to be on a good team. So I'm expecting a nice year out of Gillislee. One of New England's additions that no one's really talking about is a tight end. They have, in addition to Gronk, they signed Dwayne Allen.
Right. Those second tight ends on New England sometimes get some action. I'm filling in. I know for Gronk had the injury issue last year, didn't play a lot. Martellus Bennett, had 55 catches.
Yeah.
Dwayne Allen on Indianapolis had 35 catches last year.
And he battled a lot of injuries last year too, so that's saying a lot.
Right. He also finished 7th in the league in touchdowns for tight ends with 6. So you're absolutely right. Dwayne Allen, he's definitely an option. It's a hedge against Gronk getting injured again, as I would think. Gronk still has the back. He could go down with that back injury. Where do you see Gronk getting drafted, Joe?
I mean, people are taking him in the first round, but because of his injury history, I have a hard time taking him in the first round. I'd probably take him in the second, but he's such a talented guy. It's hard to pass on him. I have him ranked at number 2 at tight end behind Travis Kelce just because of his injuries, but I have no problem taking Gronk in the second round. But he probably won't get there.
That's a little rich for me. I wouldn't take him in the first. The second, I'd have a hard time taking him there too. The third round, you might be able to twist my arm and pick him up there, but there's a lot of good tight ends, in this league. Mm-hmm. So, without the injury risk, I expect a little bit of a slide for Gronk myself. We'll see when draft day comes around.
Well, I think having a talented guy like Dwayne Allen, too, will kind of, have to make defenses choose. And
all those targets, all those mouths to feed.
And, Dwayne Allen, for me, if you can get him to the end of your draft and as a flyer, I think he's worth every penny.
Yeah, and I just don't see any other team winning this division other than New England.
No.
There's just not enough talent. Miami may give them a little bit of a run or a scare, but I don't see Buffalo or New York challenging New England this year.
And, I mean, and we'll talk about schedule just for a quick second. Their start of the season is relatively tame. I mean, aside from Week 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs, Week 2, New Orleans, Week 3, Houston, Week 4, Carolina, Week 5, Tampa Bay, Week 6, New York Jets. So the first 6 weeks of the season, That's pretty nice.
Yep. And then, of course, Steven Gostkowski is always a top kicker pick.
Definitely.
I just, it's kind of against my policy to draft kickers. I've seen kickers that go off the board in the 9th round in some mock drafts.
Well, every mock draft I've done so far, Steven Gostkowski goes in like the 9th or 10th, and that's just too early for me.
That's crazy. You can get a decent wide receiver in the 9th or 10th round.
Oh, I agree, 100%.
And New England defense, always a good pick. Probably one of the top, half a dozen defenses to pick.
Yeah. Real quick, while we're still talking about New England, Jimmy Garoppolo, is he worth drafting as a backup?
I don't think so. I think you wait to see if Brady gets injured.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he's a guy you stash. But if you're in a keeper league, definitely draft him.
Yeah.
But if you're in a keeper league, he's probably drafted already.
Yeah.
New England's bye is week 9. And then, what do you think about the New England defense, John?
I like the New England defense, but when I usually don't pick defenses until one of my last 2 picks, just because you can, defenses are hard to predict.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see teams that are predicted to be, not a very good defense, turn out to be one of the top defenses in the league. So I mean, you can afford to wait and then see, which defense emerges. I mean, I usually wait till my last pick or 2. That's just me.
Agreed, sir. And of course, there's one more team left to talk about. We've ripped on them this whole podcast, but let's talk a little bit about the New York Jets. I got Todd Bowles in his 3rd season.
There's really only like 1 or 2 guys you think about on this team that are even worth drafting. Yeah,
and those 2 guys are probably Bilal Powell and Matt Forte.
Yeah, and I would even hesitate to say Matt Forte. I like Bilal Powell. I think he's going to emerge as the front runner. He had a decent year last year. Finished 10th in the league, I think, in total yards.
Yeah,
somewhere around there. 18th in the league with 1,110 yards. But he was he and Matt Forte finished with around 800 yards, 700 yards rushing. But the thing about Bilal Powell was that he finished 4th in the league in receptions with 58 in a part-time role.
Yeah, he's going to be great, especially in PPR leagues.
PPR is a 3rd running back or flex. I mean, Bilal Powell is a really decent pickup. A little bit of a sleeper pick for PPR and if you have a flex spot.
What round are you looking at drafting Powell?
He's ranked fairly high, which is odd since the Jets are supposed to be terrible this year.
Yeah,
but I see him going off the board a lot, mock drafts. In anywhere from the 6th round to the 9th round.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is a really good value. Even if you get him in the 6th round, if you find him in the 8th round or 9th round, I would grab him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Pretty much, they lost Eric Decker in the offseason. I mean, wide receiver wise, I mean, do you even draft Quincy Enunwa?
I think you could as your 5th running or 5th wide receiver. I think he's draftable. Did not have a bad year. I mean, I'm sure last year he probably came through for some people towards the end of the year. I mean, he had a fairly decent year for what it was.
He had a lot of targets.
He's probably the only guy. He finished 857 yards.
Yeah.
Touchdown-wise, trying to find it, he had 4. Receptions, he didn't finish in the top 50, I don't think. Oh, he did. He finished 47th with 58 catches. So he had almost the same amount of catches as Bilal Powell.
Right.
But he had 105 targets, though, which is surprising. So he Brandon Marshall's gone. Brandon Marshall led that team in targets.
Yep.
So somebody's got to catch the ball. But I think the guy opposite Quincy is Robbie Anderson.
Yep, that's correct.
Now they do have at tight end Austin Safarian Jenkins, who everyone is in love with every season. I just don't see it. You never know. And then they drafted a couple wideouts, Ardarius Stewart and Chad Hansen. Early reports are Ardarius Stewart is decent.
Yeah, well, he's from Alabama, so good program.
Still, I think Quincy's probably your only guy you want to take a flyer on.
Yep, and I'm okay with a late round flyer on Safarian Jenkins because there's not a lot of targets in the Jets, so I expect him to get some targets.
Yeah, was he on Tampa Bay last year?
He was on Tampa and then he got cut.
Okay,
because of a DUI or something.
Right, so he didn't play much last year.
Just getting up to speed. The Jets have their bye in Week 11, and we want to avoid their defense in all ways, shapes, and form.
Yeah, because they're going to be playing from behind a lot.
Yeah.
They may, defense looks like they'll be on the field a lot, and that's, not what you want from a defense.
Oh, they're going to get very tired.
I'm not sure who's kicking. They have a new kicker this year, don't they?
They do. Chandler Cannizzaro.
Right. He was on Arizona last year, I think.
Correct.
Now, you might take a flyer on him. I mean, they probably won't score a ton of touchdowns, so maybe they are kicking a lot of field goals.
Yeah.
He does have a good leg.
That he does. But he'll be using that probably more than they'll be scoring touchdowns, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have Josh McCown at quarterback, and not much after that.
Bryce Petty is their backup, and Christian Hackenberg is their third string. So avoid those guys at all costs. Josh McCown, if you need somebody in a pinch, if he's got a good matchup, but that's about it.
Yeah, he just doesn't have anyone to throw to, though. That's going to be a long season for New York. I mean, if you're a Jets fan, my condolences for this season.
Yeah, well, hopefully they can get through the growing pains and make something out of it in a few years. But that about wraps up our preview of the AFC East. Obviously, John and I both agree that New England will easily win this division. Yeah, so that's it for this edition of the first Fantasy Football Goon podcast of the year, going over the AFC East. Thanks again, John, for joining me.
Anytime.
And we will be doing a podcast for every division. So keep on coming back, and we'll have more content for you. All right, signing off. See you guys next time.
See you, Joe.
See ya.